Today I'm going to be talking to you about transforming Microstrategy report services documents into stunning dossiers. So the aim of this exercise is to modernize your Microstrategy implementation to take advantage of the newest functions of Microstrategy. So before we work out how you should transform your documents into dossiers, the first thing is to talk about why you should do it. So Microstrategy dossiers are much quicker to develop and maintain than report services documents. So report services documents are that sort of more old-fashioned pixel perfect type thing where you're moving objects around and trying to line them up very precisely on every page of the document. They date back to a time when a lot of things might have been printed out, exported to PDF, but like we say, the world has moved on from that, and what your users now need is something more interactive, something that they can spot the outliers, spot the variances to the target, to the budget, click on that piece of information and get more detail. So we're trying to aim to get something that's more interactive and less static. And they're going to be consuming those things on a variety of devices. So these objects are much easier to develop and maintain when you're doing it in a dossier. So it's a much cleaner drag and drop interface, a much easier to use interface to create them. And there's a lot less pixel perfect and small refinements of formatting that you need to do with the dossiers. The defaults for the formatting are all better, etc. Microstrategy dossiers are responsive. So this object on the right here is the same dossier. It's just designed so that when you view it on a phone, or when you view it in a smaller size browser window, or when you view it on a tablet, everything is going to either fit to the screen, or at a certain cutoff point, it's going to reformat itself so that things are aligned underneath rather than side by side. The dossiers provide an automatic chapter and page navigation system, and that navigation system is visible in different ways on different device types, making the best use of the screen size of those devices. And by using the chapter and page navigation, as all your objects move towards being a dossier, or the majority of your objects move towards being a dossier, your end users will become familiar with that paradigm and will be used to using the table of contents button and getting the chapter and page list and navigating between those pages and documents. So rather than each part of your business perhaps developing different report services documents with different navigation buttons, different home buttons, etc., it's much easier if every part of the business is using Dossier because that navigation is a standard thing. And the same applies to the filter panel. Gone really are the days there where you shove lots of what documents would have called selectors all over the dashboard, and you waste screen space on your dashboard by having the selectors visible on the screen. The idea of the filter panel, again, is that it's consistent. The way it works is consistent across all your dossiers. Users become familiar with it, and it's optimized for different device types. And it can either show a summary across the top of the dossier, or in the case of a mobile device, it doesn't need to show that because that, again, is wasting space on a phone screen, for example, and it's available through a menu option. Another one is it provides bookmarks, and those bookmarks allow multiple users to be using a dossier and yet have quick links to the bits they are interested in for their job. So there could be a dossier that's covering sales across the business, but individual managers of departments or individual teams or perhaps product categories can have their bookmarks that they can quickly access to get to the bit of dossier they require without you having to either implement security filters, because maybe those users need access to all the data, but generally they want to focus on certain parts, and without you having to do customizations that point people to particular parts of data depending on who they are. By using dossiers with bookmarks, you can develop once and have lots of users get their view of the data quickly and easily. In terms of collaboration, so if a user has a collaboration license in Microstrategy, which now has both a comments and a discussion section, so the comments are public comments in the dossier, and the discussions are more private chats between a group of people about the dossier, those comments and conversations can have context. So you can specify basically to pass the filter that you had in force when you viewed that dossier as the user gets the message in that chat or in that comment or in that discussion. So it's not just about taking what you've got already and moving it to Dossier. Moving to Dossier is a time for you to take the opportunity to refresh the content, give it a better look and feel, but also deliver more functionality and perhaps review what was done in the past. So the journey to Dossier is about modernizing the interface. It's taking those perhaps slow to develop with custom navigation options and all those things that you did before and moving it to a Dossier world. A document at the moment is still suitable for things like if you need things like transaction services and certain other types of functionality, or if you're going to do a statement or an inventory type report, which is going to be exported to a PDF with repeating sections and all those things that perhaps there's still a use case for, but they're less common in the modern world where people are used to interacting with data. So the document is still suitable for some things, but generally to get better interactivity and more availability to interact with the data and choose to focus on particular areas and get new information, then the Dossier takes over from that for those use cases. So when you're thinking about moving a document to a Dossier, the main thing is not to lift and shift. Don't just take the document as it was. That document may have been created 2 years ago, may have been created 5 years ago, potentially even 10 years ago, and just evolved over time. And could have become a bit of a monster as people kept adding in requirements without any thought for what was the original aim of the document in the first place. So think about, is that information still relevant? Do you need more or less information on the screen? Is some of the information obsolete? Those types of things. Do you need to be able to export or distribute that document? Your end users would probably prefer something that's more interactive. The aim is not to provide them with a data dump that they go and do something in Excel. The aim is to provide them with the document, with the information in the Dossier that answers their question. So the dashboard answering their question and perhaps giving them that degree of drill down or that degree of filtering on the particular point of interest at that point in time within the interface. Then think about, does it need to be available on mobile devices, just on the web browser, or on both? But even when you thought about that question, design for mobile anyway. And this was always a mantra, even with report services documents. So you've got to think about, can someone tap on the points on that graph, or can someone tap on the bars to interact with them? Can someone, is my finger too big to interact with this dashboard? If my finger is too big to interact with this dashboard, say on a tablet, then you're probably cramming too much information onto the page, even in your original report services document. Think about splitting it into multiple pages. The Dossier allows you to have interactions between pages, so contextual linking between pages in a Dossier. Don't try and show too much at once is a key thing about any interface design. So the Dossier impact is all about giving data-driven insights to end users. So they're created with an intuitive drag and drop interface. Now, I think Nick covered some of this if you were in the other channel earlier on today. But they're about giving that drag and drop interface. People can create dossiers without really any training. If you've provided a data set for them out of the box, so they don't need to do any data preparation, then a user should be able to take an existing dossier or create a new dossier based on that data set with very little training, because they're in a safe world with that data set. Obviously, if users are going to have to create their own data sets and do stuff, that takes a little bit more, but just doing that self-service analytics on existing data sets is straightforward. And then we can increase user adoption by providing access to these dossiers through your personalized library. And that library is available on both the web and potentially on tablets and phones. And those business users will get used to that paradigm of going to that library for the ones they are interested in. So in terms of development of Dossier, it's easy to create visualizations within the Dossier. So the visualization gallery provides you that access to groups of different visualization types. And you can also add custom visualizations. So either ones from our community or ones you develop yourself using the API. So for example, taking a D3 visualization and putting it in a wrapper to include within MicroStrategy. You've got those drag and drop workflows for the drop zones, either dragging into the drop zones for the visualization or taking them directly into the visualization itself. There's two ways of doing it. And you've got this the granular formatting. So you can change the titles and then the objects within, you've got the font formatting, etc., as shown here in the video. I'm not going to let this whole video play. I'll just skip forward. In terms of precisely formatting the dossiers, you've got two options in terms of layout. This video on the right here is showing a freeform layout. So individual visualizations or objects like shapes or text boxes, etc., can be dragged and dropped and overlaid on top of each other within the dossier, and yet still be responsive when viewed on different devices. So the shapes allow you to group things together, put boxes around things, emphasize certain areas of the dashboard. You can move objects to the front and the back, etc. You can put colors around things. And they allow you to give a sort of a logical grouping to different areas of your dashboard as you work. And in terms of auto-sizing the text, so the text can be set to auto-size. So as the device the browser window changes size, or if you move to a different type of device, that text is going to change to be appropriate for that device. So it's still legible. So I guess the first question here is, should I use the freeform layout? Always bear in mind that the auto layout is quicker to develop and maintain, and it's good for that fast analysis. It's also inherently uncluttered. You're not overlaying things over the top of each other. You're not putting too much on the screen at once. So really switch to the freeform layout if it's required to meet some specific formatting requirements that actually add to the business user satisfaction with the dashboard. Don't just go to freeform layout because you want a logo to be overlaid with something. Do it because there's a business requirement that means you need to do it. You can create infographic type dossiers by overlaying things in a freeform layout, and maps over background images or maps with something else overlaid over the top. But be careful that the people doing that understand about the user interface and user experience rules about not being too cluttered. And just because you've used freeform layout for one of the layouts in your, one of the pages in your dossier, doesn't mean you're going to use it for every page. So use it as it's appropriate within the dossier. So in terms of responsive design, you can group together objects within a dossier. So you could have several visualizations, and this is again showing a freeform type layout on a dossier. And you can group those objects together so they will always stay together even when viewed on different types of device. So here's a preview of that on a narrower device, and it's showing that those objects can be grouped together and stay together as you switch the aspect ratio effectively of the view of the dossier. You've got some mobile only and canvas only containers. So you can have objects that you can't see when you're viewing them in one view, but you can see when you're viewing them on mobile. So you could have a sort of almost a navigation bar with links to different dossiers, if you need to, that's visible in one way on one device and a different way on a different device. And then you can use vertical scrolling. So there's an option within the page to set the minimum height of the page. So what it means is it will always allow you to have scrolling if the page is shrunk to a certain, if the device that you're viewing on is shrunk to a certain size, or always have scrolling if you set that minimum height quite tall. So that again allows you to sort of do that storytelling type dossier where you scroll down to build the story of what you're looking at. So with the more important information at the top, and scrolling down to the detail as you go further down. So it's less about an interactive clicking on things and filtering things and more about a story. So when we're talking about responsive design, you need to understand how the Z paths work. So if you look at the diagram on the left as you're designing the dossier, you can have individual visualizations or objects or groupings of objects, and MicroStrategy will work through them on a sort of a left to right and then down the page. So it's effectively drawing a Z, if you can see my mouse cursor, through the document all the way down to the bottom. So drawing Zs in a loop. And that is the order they will be rendered if you view on a smaller device that is too narrow to show them side by side. And there's a good article on the community site about the best practices for doing a responsive freeform dossier in that way. So again, we're telling data-driven stories. You've got the chapter and page navigation, which we talked about at the start, and your users will become familiar with that as they use multiple dossiers within your enterprise. And then you've got the ability to link to other dossiers. So we can have a link, a button at the top of one dossier that links to another dossier, and if it needs to, it can pass the filter conditions across to the target page. So if you've filtered on something on the source dossier, then that filter can pass across to the target dossier as you move along. And the contextual link was a similar thing, but this time he is passing the filter when choosing the objects in this case. So they're going to a different page and they've got the pass filter conditions selected. We then move on to how to consume those dossiers. So this is an example showing Microstrategy Library on a browser. I think Matt might have shown this one slightly earlier. I'm just going to talk through it a bit. So you've got the ability to drill. You've got the ability to have visualizations filtering each other. And then even on the browser, if the browser is narrow, you've got that responsive design. So this looks similar to how it would look on a mobile device, although some of the navigation options change slightly in the mobile app. So the library allows you to group dossiers together. So the user can choose which dossiers they add to their library. So someone could share a link with them to a dossier. If they find it useful, they can add it to their library. You've got the ability to search for dossiers within your library, and then you've got the ability to add bookmarks. So we talked about bookmarks earlier. It's the ability to have one dossier that serves multiple people because they can quickly get to the part of the dossier that they really care about on a daily, weekly, whatever it is basis. You've got, so there's the different filters. It's showing the filter panel here in the dossier. And then you've got collaboration. So you can send comments to individual people or discussions to, comments targeting at individual people but visible to all, or comments that are visible just to the people within that, discussions that are visible just to the people within that discussion. And we can export the whole dossier as a PDF, or you can export individual grids or data behind a visualization into something like Excel or a text file. We then move on to Microstrategy Mobile. Microstrategy Library Mobile. So this is viewing dossiers from your library on a mobile device. As part of the library configuration, you can have links which specify a landing dossier effectively for a particular set of people. And that link can configure their library mobile app so that they land on a particular homepage, for example, and that has jump points off to other dossiers. Or if your users are already familiar with the library, then you can just have them accessing the library homepage with their list of dossiers in their library, the same as they experience on the web. Now, the dossiers that are in your library can be automatically loaded faster so that they're available when the user is offline with smart download. And that can include bookmarks across their on their device. So if they've got bookmarks to a particular area of a dossier, that bookmark could be downloaded in advance for that user on the library mobile app. And again, what's in their library is the same. So their dossiers and their bookmarks work the same across the browser and the mobile app on the device. We've also got the Microstrategy App. So this is a desktop client that's installed on Windows or Mac. It effectively is your library, but with a faster interface. So a lot of the way the library renders, that logic is held in that app rather than having to be loaded from the web server all the time. So again, it can do smart downloads so that some of the dossiers are already ready if you've got that app running in the background and it's keeping them up to date. So that automatic refresh can take place. And you've got it's got hyperintelligence built in to that Microstrategy app. So you've got hypercards and you can search cards, for example, within the Microstrategy app. So the Microstrategy app is a component that's been around for a year or so, I think. and it's part of the Reporter Pro license type with MicroStrategy. So just some key points about how we transform documents into dossiers. So you need to identify which documents you should be doing redesign work on. Think about why were they created in the first place? Has the business moved on since they were created? Should I be taking some of the data out that's not relevant anymore, adding some different data in that is now relevant before you start doing the work on creating a dossier? Because it's pointless lifting and shifting it if it's not relevant anymore. And it's about storytelling. It's about getting the information to the user so they can quickly spot the bits of information they need to see as exceptions, outliers, variances to target, etc. Make sure that those things are what's clear to your audience. And then work on creating those dossiers and making them good looking. That doesn't necessarily mean spending a lot of time with images. It just means getting them in a clear, concise layout without too much cluttered information. Now, while I've been talking, I can see there's hundreds of questions coming in, and I can see that Matt's been answering some of them in the chat. So I'm going to go to Q&A a bit earlier than I expected because I think I should rattle through things. Okay, so I see Matt's been answering some questions. I expected there'd be questions on what's coming. So I can see in the chat, and I'll repeat it here for others on that haven't been monitoring the chat, that there's been questions about what's coming with Dossier. So information windows is one where in a report services document, you can have it so you click on a line somewhere, or you hover over something and you get a pop-up with more detail about that particular data point. So that information window functionality is coming to dossiers. And similarly, transaction services is one of the key reasons why you have to do that in documents at the moment. And there is work on that, and I've actually seen prototypes of that with transaction services within a dossier. So allowing the user to submit data back to a database or a web service, etc., through the background.